or whether you're talking one to one at your family or at work or wherever it may be, you always speak into a listening. And that's an important thing to consider because it allows you to start asking the question, what's the listening I'm speaking into, which is listening to the listening. It's being sensitive to
Mm.
the receiver. And that is crucial because the biggest mistake I see all the time people making is assuming that everybody listens like I do, and they do not.
Hello and welcome to Beyond Networking, the show where we help you build a sustainable career in an unpredictable world. We believe if you learn to weave a network of people who trust you, who feel heard, understood, and valued in your presence, there will always be someone willing to hire you, buy from you, or work with you. On this show, we feature intimate conversations with legends and leaders of industries about the relationships, connections, and chance encounters that form the foundation of success. Remember to subscribe for world-class insights on how to build a life and career that you are proud of. And join our community at beyondnetworkingpodcast.com. All right, that's it for me. Now it's time to go beyond networking with this week's guest, Julian. Thank you so much for being here today. I really do appreciate your time.
That's an absolute pleasure, Brian. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. So these days, if you're at a social gathering, a cocktail party, you meet someone that you're meeting for the first time and they ask, "What do you do?" How do you answer these days?
Well, I tend to use the phrase, I'm a sound evangelist, which kind of is the nearest thing I've got so far to what I believe in and what I do. Um, I've got two kind of parallel lives, I suppose, professionally. One is running the sound agency, which is an international audio branding company, which has just launched a revolutionary product for office sound.
Hmm.
And the other one is speaking and promoting, largely listening. I mean, it's kind of the other way around. I've got TED Talks, which have been seen by, I think, goodness knows, I don't know, 100 million people now or something incredible. And the one on speaking has been seen by 5 times as many people as the one on listening, which says something, doesn't it?
It really
Um,
does.
so I tend to use the kind of speaking as the spoonful of sugar to engage people in the conversation about listening. I mean, I say a lot that they're in a circular relationship, and if you want to be a powerful speaker, you need to be a good listener too. But listening is, to me, that's the holy grail. That's the thing that the world needs a little more of right now.
What is so I'm so glad you right away you brought up the disparity between your really, really super mega famous talk on how to speak so that someone wants to listen, and then the view count, like you said, which is 5 times lesser on the listening one. I noticed that a couple of years ago, and then when I was reading your book, I saw you noted the same thing by yourself right in there. So I wanted to ask you about that. Does that frustrate you?
I think it's natural um, because, well, there are a couple of, I suppose, social or cultural things which have driven that to a degree. First of all, the dominance of um, text-based communication, which is really pushing us into kind of an active engagement, typing, reading, being more focused on outbound.
Mm.
That's perhaps always been the case, I suppose. I mean, the adage of you've got 2 ears and one mouth, so think about that. That goes back to Roman times, doesn't it?
Mm.
So it's been a long time the case that a lot of human beings have been more interested in speaking than in listening. Also, listening is a very passive sense. You certainly need to engage. I mean, it's a skill. Hearing is a passive sense, I should say.
Mm.
Sound comes inside your head, through the holes in the side of your head, collected by the wonderful pinna, and vibrates a tiny little membrane, which miraculously, to me, decodes everything from Beethoven's Ninth to the soundtrack of Terminator. It's amazing. That tiny little, it's 3 millimeters or something. That's all we have, and it
Mm.
decodes everything. The hearing is an amazing sense. but it's a passive sense. Whereas I think vision is a more active sense, speaking is a more active sense. They're kind of projecting out. I know with your eyes you're receiving light, but it always feels like, because you can move them around and direct your
Mm,
gaze, it feels more outbound, doesn't it?
yeah.
So I do think there's this desire to impact on the world, to be making change, to be affecting what's going on, which is at odds with, much more of a Susan Cain introvert type of
Mm,
sense, which is being quiet and receiving peacefully and, having no control over what's coming in. Whereas, of course, with vision and with speaking, you've got a lot of control. So those are some thoughts on, I suppose, why it is that human beings naturally focus more on speaking than on listening. Certainly in the last, I don't know, 30 or 40 years, the new communication protocols that we've developed have all been very much more about outbound than
mm,
inbound. It's much more about rattling away, typing some sort of post or mini blog or tweet or whatever it might be. I'm on a train. Who cares? But there's this fantasy that there are thousands of people out there hanging on. Oh, I wonder what Julian's doing right now. Sadly, no.
So, to that end, then, I've discovered in my own work and spent a lot of time chatting with folks and, speaking and, we're both on that kind of speaking circuit. You obviously at a much different level than I am, but I'm out there talking to
Sure.
people on a regular basis, especially students. I spend about half my time in the States doing kind of the college tour, which I know that's not really as big a thing over in the UK. I've discovered when I was an entertainer, when I was a full-time magician, the college market here is huge. You can make a full-time, very nice living. That doesn't really exist over there. Am I right
No,
about that?
you're absolutely right. Yes, I mean
Yeah.
nobody goes to watch college sport really. You'd get apart from the big match between Cambridge and Oxford at Twickenham in rugby. If you go to a college and there's a football match going on, you might have 8 people and a dog watching, but not 60,000 people. That's for sure.
Yeah. No, it's incredible here. So I spend a lot of time with students and also with mostly my work focuses on young professionals trying to build a sustainable career in an increasingly divisive, distracted, unpredictable world, right? And
Mm,
there's a lot of
mm,
anxiety out there from young people right now.
mm,
What I've noticed, though, is contrary to what people would believe, the people who are best at connecting with others, of building networks, tend to be introverts
mm,
or at least tend to be people who speak less, right? We think, but if you ask those people about it, they don't think that's who they are, right? If you ask people who are introverts, they'll tell you, "Oh, I wish I was an extrovert because then
mm,
I could just command the attention of people."
mm.
Do you think there's something about or what is it about being an introvert, being the one that listens more than talks that actually leads you to making better connections?
Well, of course, if we have a world where everybody is into talking loudly, that's rather a noisy place,
Mm,
and it ends up, as many restaurants do,
mm.
in your country particularly, but now sadly all over the world,
Yes, yes.
with everybody bellowing at the top of their voice and going home with a sore throat and a sore head because the acoustics are lousy, and a thing called um, the Lombard effect kicks in, where I'm
Mm,
speaking loudly, so you speak a bit louder, and then I speak a bit louder, and then you speak a bit louder. And it goes up and up and up until everybody's at maximum. Doesn't take long. And
mm.
so I don't think we want a world like that. I mean, if you look at politics right now, that pretty much shows you what happens if nobody's listening and everybody's
Yeah.
shouting. I mean, that is where we are, sadly, on both sides of the Atlantic, and indeed in many other countries. When you look at what's happening in India as well, it's the politics of confrontation, polarization, caricature, and not a lot of listening. Politicians go off and have talks, and I wish they would go off and have listens instead.
Mm,
I think we'd be in a better world. So, the answer, I think, to your original question is that people who listen tend to engage rather more easily because we mostly like being listened to. So, if I'm talking to you and you're listening attentively, as you are at the moment, that gives me a good feeling.
mm,
It's a validation. It means I'm not an idiot. It means that I'm not boring, and so on and so on. So there's a lot of validation of the other person in listening. I often describe real listening, true listening as a gift. You
Mm.
know, Scott Peck said you cannot truly listen to another human being and do anything else at the same time. And I think that's absolutely right. But sadly, in the modern age, that's rare. I think there are billions of people on this planet who've simply never had the experience of being truly listened to because we're always doing something else. You know,
Mm.
I am listening, tapping away on a screen or making some food or something. No, you're doing something else
Mm.
that precludes you from really listening. Now, you know, we do our best and we have to do a lot of things at once and we're time poor and the world is complex and so forth. Nevertheless, it is possible to put everything down, take a deep breath and say, I'm going to listen to you. And what a gift that is. And what a rare thing it is. And the other person naturally feels engaged, complimented, and that generates relationship. That generates connection. If we're all
Mm.
shouting, there's no connection.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful answer, and it reminds me of something, a friend, colleague of mine that came on last season. He's an executive coach, and he said something that just I'll never forget. Just the way he phrased it. He said, "The most interested person in the room is always the most interesting."
Mm, that's so true. And I
Yeah.
often say to people, when I coach people or people who I come across who say, well, nobody listens to me. I feel so frustrated. I can't seem to get a foothold in a conversation. I say the answer is to listen to the other person, ask questions,
Mm.
open-ended questions, why, what, how, which, when, who, those kind of questions. Or if failing those, just using a little phrase like, oh, tell me more about that.
Mm.
You know, that's drawing the other person out. The other person starts to feel good. They feel listened to, and they're much more likely to listen to you as well, unless they're just a steamroller, in which case, do you want a relationship with them? I don't know.
Right. Okay. So you answered what I was just about to follow up with, which is that the one concern I have over when I see so much communication advice, and you read a lot of it, is that so much communication advice seems to treat communication as if it's not a two-way street, where it focuses on only how to speak or only how to listen. And I can fall into this trap because my whole thing is about connection. So I focus mostly on active listening and reflective listening. That's but I realize sometimes that someone will come up to me after a workshop and they'll say, "Listen, that's all. This is all great. Like I loved it. This is good stuff." But if I just listen, no one ever lets me talk.
Mm,
I never get to say my perspective. I never get to share, and then I just feel like no one cares.
mm.
So like,
Well,
yeah, yeah.
I think you're absolutely right, and you've read the book, so you know that the core of the book and that the opening proposition really of the book is what I call the circle, which is the
Mm,
relationship between speaking and listening. So many people think it's linear. I speak, you listen. It's a straight line. No, it's a
mm,
circle all the time because the way I speak affects the way you listen, and the way you listen affects the way I speak, and the way I speak affects the way you speak, and the way I listen affects the way you listen.
mm, mm.
So there's this complex dynamic going on all the time in a conversation. Less so in a structured one like this, where we're doing effectively a radio show. So there are some
Sure.
hidden rules here, folks. Which we're conforming to. In a normal conversation, there'd be a lot more. Oh, really? A lot more feedback going
Right.
on radio. If you do that kind of stuff, it's a little bit irritating for the listener.
Right.
So there are, in any given situation, there are loose rules that may or may not apply. Um, and it was interesting actually. A while back, I did a BBC Radio 4 documentary called "The Curse of Open Plan," and I was talking with Professor Jeremy Myerson, who's an expert on offices and how they've developed, how the office environment's developed. We were in the BBC looking at their open plan environment, which drives many of them mad. They can't, they're journalists, they're trying to write, and there's somebody behind them talking about their great night out last night. We have no earlids. We are programmed to decode language. We can't understand two people talking at the same time. And that includes the person behind you and your head when you're trying to listen to the little voice you need to listen to when you're trying to write something. So it's massively damaging for productivity. And Jeremy reflected very interestingly. He said, "You know what? This is like the Wild West. There are no rules that we've established in open plan. When you're at home, the postman doesn't come striding into your living room and dump the post on the middle of the floor. But in the open plan office, that's what happens. There's no kind of boundaries. There's no way of signaling a little flag that says, I'm really busy, please don't talk around me, or a hat you could wear or something. There's no signal like that. So people don't conform to any rules, and it is like the Wild West. Nevertheless, in many situations, we are aware of the rules. They vary from culture to culture, society to society, family to family.
Mhm.
You go to Italy, and the rule is everybody talks at the same time around the
It's my
dinner
family.
table. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, I love it, but the volume level is intense, and they seem to be able to single out one person. I think that gets harder as you get older with the cocktail effect. I mean, I find it very difficult in a noisy room now to isolate one person. But nevertheless, that's a very different environment from perhaps a Northern Europe uh, dining room, which would be a much quieter place. I just came back from Finland, where people are very, very quiet indeed,
Uh,
generally. So it is cultural. Nevertheless, I think, you know, if you're in doubt and if you can't get a toehold in a conversation, people just won't listen. Drawing them out is a good thing. And the other tip I would give on this, which I think is very powerful, and I'm a great fan of, is little contracts. So, Brian,
yeah,
do you have 5 minutes? I really need to talk to you.
I do.
Well, thank you. So then I have a contract with you. You've just
Great.
committed to listen to me for 5 minutes.
Great.
How many times do we just pile straight in? And we don't know if the person's just had terrible news or is wondering what they're going to buy for lunch or
Yeah.
is upset because they've just had an argument with somebody or
Yeah.
has a tremendously important thing they've got to do in 3 minutes and they haven't got time to listen right now. So that contract is a really effective way, particularly for somebody who's a little bit shy or whatever. Do you have 5 minutes? I really need to talk to you. And that's, it's hard to turn that down if you really have got 5 minutes. And then by making that contract, you've actually bought 5 minutes of listening, which is very, very valuable thing.
That's fantastic. I love that. That's such a good technique, and especially because the point you made there about I'll do this by accident to my wife a lot. I'm a much more classic extrovert. She's a much more classic introvert, which is side note on the Italian family. Half of my family is 100% Italian, and and she is my wife. When we were dating, and the first time she met my family, she is um, uh, Irish Catholic, came from a relatively proper kind of a quieter family. And the first time she ever went to Long Island in New York to visit my family, she just had her eyes were just wide at the dinner table with the cacophony of, and then when we left that trip, she said, "Now I understand." Like that.
Yeah, you were probably being quite toned down with her.
Yeah, and she just had a moment where she actually understood
Mm,
really intuitively for the first time that when I was interrupting her, which I never viewed as interrupting. We had this that was the only fight we ever had early in our dating, which is she said, "You interrupt me, and it makes me feel like you think what you have to say is more important than what I have to say." And I remember saying, "No, no, no, I'm not interrupting you. You said something that got me really excited, and I wanted to share that with you." Once she met my family and she saw everybody just screams over each other the whole day, the only
mm,
way to get your word in is to just scream over that person.
mm.
It's amazing how just a little shift in perspective can actually change. And so I agreed to her early in our relationship that I would do my best to let her get all the way through her thought because she viewed it as rude, and it doesn't matter how I view it, right? She
Mm.
viewed it as rude. And she also agreed to give me a little bit of a break when I accidentally did that because she knew it wasn't coming from malintent. So I think that,
That's so good. And
yeah.
and that hits on a couple of things I talk about a lot with listening. First of all, that you always speak into a listening.
Mm,
And whether you're a professional speaker like you are and like I am, or whether you're talking one to one at your family or at work or wherever it may be, you always speak into a listening. And that's an important thing to consider because it allows you to start asking the question, what's the listening I'm speaking into, which is listening to the listening. It's being sensitive to
mm,
the receiver. And that is crucial because the biggest mistake I see all the time people making is assuming that everybody listens like I do, and they do not because we listen through this set of filters that I talked about in my third TED talk, the one on conscious listening, the culture you're born into, the language you speak. So we just talked about, the Italian culture, and that is a different form of listening from, for example, Far East countries, where if somebody elderly speaks, it would be crushingly rude to talk over them and interrupt them because of the respect that there is for older, wiser people, and the way that whole thing works there. So it's very important to be sensitive to those things, the culture, the language, your values, attitudes, beliefs, the things that you accrete along the way from your parents originally, and then perhaps from friends, role models, teachers, whoever it might be. You choose some, you throw away others. I've chosen different ones and I've thrown away different ones, probably. There may be many similarities, but they will not be identical. And then in any given situation, you may have intentions, expectations. You may have emotions going on, assumptions about how the world works and what people think about me, and so forth. So there's all these things which create your listening, and everybody you speak to has got that going on too. So there's a couple of really important things that come with this, I think, transformational realization. The first is, if I become conscious of my filters, I can start playing with them, using them as control surfaces, changing my listening position, which is one of the exercises I really love. And if I'm conscious of other people's filters, then I can speak much more accurately into their listening, whether it's one person or 5,000 people. There's a listening there, and simply by asking yourself the question, what's the listening I'm speaking into, you can sense it. You can sense it. I mean, that on a stage. I know that on a stage. I can
Mm.
sense the listening I'm speaking. Is it just after lunch? They're a bit tired. The blood's all gone to their gut. Is it the end of the day? Am I the only thing in between them and the bar or going home? Is it first thing in the morning? Do they need waking up? You have to be sensitive to these things. Is it an older audience? Younger? What are the cultural references here? What are
Mm.
their problems? What are they really here for? What are they hoping for? How can I give a gift that's got some meaning to them? And all of these questions can apply in one-to-one conversation just as much. Easier one-to-one because we're seeing the other person right in
Yeah.
front of us a lot of the time. And there are visual cues, which we all know how to pick up, whether it's little facial expressions or body language or pheromones or whatever it
Mm.
might be. We're picking stuff up all the time, which gives us cues back. So speaking into the listening is a really, really fundamental part of getting people to listen to you. And I think many, many of the people who have the problem of not being listened to, it's largely because they don't ask that question. What's the listening I'm speaking into? Do they have the time? Are they interested in this? What will they be interested in? What's driving them? How can I make this conversation valuable to them?
That those are such powerful questions to be able to ask yourself, and I think you're right. I feel like sometimes I underestimate that I got to learn this stuff intuitively as a stage performer, as a magician from very young. I was doing magic professionally at 16, and so I've had this
Mm,
long kind of my age betrays the amount of years I've been on stages, right? And so sometimes when I'm trying to teach this stuff, it just feels so intuitive because
mm,
when you're on a stage, you can, like you said, you can just feel that there's a different way the audience is listening than they were even 30 minutes ago or will be an hour from now. Even if you're giving the same talk 3 days in a row to three different audiences,
mm.
it's just such a different feeling. Could have been something in the news that morning. Could have just been whoever just spoke right before you. Maybe they, were excellent, or maybe they were terrible, and that both of those things can affect how they're listening to
Oh,
you.
big time. Or they really piss off the audience, in
Oh
which case
yeah,
you come on to a bunch of really angry people. I mean, that all of those things you and I have probably had to deal with over the years.
yeah.
And people often say to me, I'm going on after you. I'm feeling so nervous. And I said, don't worry about it. Just because I've got TED Talks and I'm all right at this, it does not affect what you're going to do yourself. You need to be yourself. I talk about the hail of speaking in power, honesty, authenticity, integrity, and love. And the authenticity is really important, being yourself. So even if somebody's come on and done, a brilliant, like if I came on after you, you'd do a brilliant magic show. Everybody, they'd be laughing, they'd be engaged, they'd, all that stuff. They'd be whooping and hollering. I'm sure there'd be interaction with the audience. And I would stride on stage, a relatively reserved English person with a very different vibe altogether. Well, I need to acknowledge where they're coming from, and I need to make an adjustment with them so that they know that they're now into a different scene here. And as long as I'm conscious and I'm working on it and I don't ignore it, it will work fine. I know it does because it has many, many times.
And that's that circle that we were talking about earlier, right? Where
Mm.
you we were talking about just now speaking into the listening, and then you're drawing that circle there where you're saying, well, because I know that I'm speaking into a different sort of listening, I need to speak now to make an adjustment so their listening adjusts to how I'm going to speak. And that, right? That's that circle you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Great.
I mean, if you're, as long as you're conscious and you're asking the questions of yourself all the time. And the other big thing to remember, of course, is that you're there to give a gift. I mean, it's not about you anyway. That's always the case, whether it's again a one-to-one conversation
Yeah.
or you're standing on stage in front of thousands of people. It's not about getting approbation, getting affirmation, being loved, respected, admired, and all that stuff. It's about giving a gift. It's about what can you give to the other person. So that's where those questions of what do they need, what's of value, and so forth. Any great salesperson will tell you the most important part of the sales conversation is the listening, not the speaking, because you need to understand the other person. Otherwise, you're going to be selling them the wrong thing completely. And we've all had that experience. Like
Oh
somebody
yeah.
who's fast talking, glib, and completely irritating because they don't listen to us.
I've had when I was in my mid 20s and I was doing reasonably well in my career, but I still looked like I was in my mid 20s, and so I used to have the opposite thing happen where I would walk into a furniture store that was a reasonably nice furniture store, and the salesman wouldn't even give me the time of day because I was just some mid 20-year-old kid. They have no idea that I had the money to drop on there. They could have made a terrific sale, but
Mhm.
because they didn't pay me any attention, I walked out. I went somewhere
Mm.
else. So I think that can go both ways, and I love that point, that human connection, that listening, making people feel heard and understood is a gift, and it's like it's becoming a more and more precious and very very rare gift. And I feel like we're finally, at least I am. I'm feeling that backlash to what's been going on for the last decade or so now, really for the last 4 or 5 years, which is if you're out there in the world now in airports and public places and coffee shops, you can feel it. People are begging for a real connection with someone now.
Mm.
All you have to do now with standing in line with someone is just say, "Hey, how's your day?" And boom, they're in. They're ready to tell you all about it because no one has asked them about themselves in ages.
Mm.
It's
Well,
amazing.
yes, although we still have the problem that most of them are looking at something in their hand and tapping away with a frowny face on.
Sure.
TED used to be a place where the best place to meet people was always the queue. And when it was back in Monterey, there was a queue because there weren't enough seats for the people. So you had to go early and queue up if you wanted to get a seat in the main auditorium. So people would queue for, immediately they'd come out one door and go and stand in a queue for the other one for the coffee break. And you would immediately start talking to somebody. Hey, what do you do? Well, I've just interviewed the Dalai Lama. Oh, that's a normal TED conversation. So that kind of thing went on all the time. Now, not so much because people in queues are looking at their hand. Now, I have to say, I'm very glad that that is about to change because the audio revolution is coming. It's something the sound agency is very engaged in.
Mm.
We're going to be talking to the internet and listening to the internet and not typing, not using our fingers and our eyes the whole time. So that's a very different thing. The
Can,
demise of the pedestrian, the person who
yeah.
stops in front of you and you ram into them because they're immediately they're typing away and they didn't have any consciousness of what was going on around them. So that's all about to happen.
Can you dig into that for us a
Mm,
little bit? Because I think those of us in the industry and are excited about audio know exactly what you're talking about. But I think there's a lot of people listening that have no idea what this audio revolution is that you're talking about.
well, it's upon us, really. I just did a talk in Helsinki to the radio industry there, talking about exactly this. Um, we have seen the first wave of it, which is smart speakers. And Those have taken the US by storm, I know. In Finland, not so much because they don't speak Finnish yet. But when they do, I think a lot more people will be installing them there too. Every country in the world eventually will have these devices, which means we can walk around controlling our home by voice. Now, I don't particularly want to have a relationship with my fridge. I don't know about you. And what is going to happen is, first of all, these devices around us will become smarter and smarter. And secondly, there'll be an intelligent agent which will arise, something like Super Siri, or something that's actually able to hold a conversation with you and ultimately artificially intelligent. So instead of having, I don't know how many apps you've got on your phone, but I have like 200 apps on my phone or
Too
something
many.
like that. Yeah, too many. 200 too many. And how much time do we spend filling in our credit card details, our
Mm.
passwords, our address, our date of birth, every time we want to do something? Well, it won't be like that in the future. I will simply say, Fred, or whatever the name of my intelligent agent is, I need to go to Brazil next week. Could you check flights on Wednesday, coming back Sunday? And by the way, could you see if that room I stayed in last time at that hotel is still available? And if so, just hold it for me. And Fred will go off and do all of the passwords and date of birth and credit card numbers and so on. Apps, no. Simple conversation with something that will become a friend, a bit like Jarvis in Iron Man. I mean, that seems
Yeah.
like science fiction. It is right now, but it's not going to be in a few years. And we'll be talking to it as we move around as well, because ultimately it'll be wearable, something in your ear, and then it'll move to a bone implant in your skull,
Mhm.
which works through bone conduction. It'll be able to hear you perfectly well and speak to you perfectly well. So we will all have those. I think in my lifetime that will all be happening. So it's going to change a great deal. We will be speaking through a gatekeeper, and for the marketing industry, that's massive. How are they going to get through that gatekeeper? And who's going to own it? Is the other really interesting question. Will it be Google, Apple, Amazon, Microsoft? Who? I don't know. It's going to be really interesting to watch what happens in this. But the good news is, well, two things really. One, our eyes and our fingers are liberated. Now, I'm not anti text. Writing is wonderful. It's
Mhm.
caused some of the great revolutions in the world, publishing things. You can't communicate with a million people so easily by speaking to them. You can
Right.
certainly do that by writing. However, it has, since it's only 4,000 years old and speaking's, like 160,000 years old or something, um, I think writing has really dominated out of all proportion over the last 40 years. So we get liberated. We can walk around looking at things and using our hands for other things than typing, which is all to the good. And the second great thing is that we will rediscover the art of speaking and listening, because it will become again, as it was for hundreds of thousands of years, or certainly a long time, the most natural way for us to communicate. And
Right.
that's with machines just as much as with people.
It's fantastic. I am very excited for that revolution to come. I know there's a lot of people that get very nervous, very anxious, and I find myself repeating recently as when I chat with people and I talk about getting excited over self-driving cars, and you get a lot of pushback. Oh no, that's going to be terrible. It's going to be the worst. And I find myself repeating kind of Elon Musk's mantra on that, which is, well, there was a time when, elevators were all human driven. And then there was a while there where everybody was nervous. Nobody wanted to set foot in an automatic elevator. Now you would never trust a human being with your elevator.
Mm,
I'm very excited. Although you brought up that was a really interesting point. We don't need to dig into here. It's not really relevant, but I had not considered the fact that that technology will be owned by some corporation, and you're going to have to
mm,
decide, do you want Google to own the space inside your head?
mm.
That's real. That's really interesting.
Yes, and
Um,
how personalizable will it be? I mean, there are great possibilities when you think about lonely people who are living on their own and
mm,
suddenly able to have a real conversation with something that's very human and caring and pleasant and so forth. That is going to help a great deal in many ways. Lots of good things will happen.
it's
On the other
beautiful.
hand, the data, who
Yeah,
owns it?
yeah.
That's a big question.
It is. It is for sure. I want to pivot here and make sure I get a chance to ask you the question that everybody gets asked on the show. It's kind of the hook of the show, but it's my most curious thing about all these wonderful people I get to chat with. So, Julian, do you have a story of a chance encounter in your life, personally or professionally, that either really impacted you or them or both? It doesn't have to be someone you stayed in touch with, although it could be. It's really whatever comes to mind.
Well, I do actually. It's one that I've often thought about because it was so pivotal in my life. I was at university. I had the fortune to go to Cambridge University, and in my first year, I think it was actually in my first term, um, I found a note in my pigeonhole, which says, "I hear you're a drummer. If you'd like to join a band, call me." And it was from a guy called John Romney, who later became a film critic over here in the national papers. And I called him. I wasn't a great drummer at the time, but I was keen. And we put a band together, which became a band called Fish Turned Human, and released a single. And in recording that single at the legendary Spacewood Studios in Cambridge, um, I met the guitarist who came up from London to record that session, became friends with him, moved when I left Cambridge, moved down to London, and eventually moved to Ealing, the part of London he lived in, um, and kind of became part of a musician. It's not a collective, but a group of friends who were in several different bands, uh, several of which I played with or had great contact with. It was my life for a number of years, and it set me off on a course of being a musician, running a recording studio with Sid Wells, who still works for me today at the sound agency. He's our technical director, like 40 years later. And I think if I hadn't had that note in my pigeonhole, things would have been very different because that whole part of my life sensitized me to sound.
Mm,
And, people often say, why do you do what you do? How did it happen that you do what you do? Well, I had a whole career in marketing, producing magazines for companies, but all the way through, I was playing music. And so when I sold that publishing company, the heartland, the place I wanted to come back to was sound and music. So I
mm,
formed the sound agency in 2003. And so I think everything that's happened to me and the reason we're having this conversation now and all the people I know pretty much came from that one note in my pigeonhole. If that had never existed, goodness knows what I'd be doing now. I might be an economist, or that's what I studied at university, or a tax inspector, or something like that. Who knows? So, yeah, that was one of those nodes where the paths lead off in different directions, and
Mm.
that was the path I went on.
Wow, that's great, and I love hearing these stories. For one, because I love reminding my audience. It's kind of the whole reason I started this podcast a couple of seasons ago, was to just continually remind my audience that the most successful people all have these stories of chance encounters. And sometimes the difference between success and not success is simply that the successful people saw them for what they were in that moment, and followed through. And that we have so many every day. Like, you have 3, 4, 10 chance encounters a day that don't have to become the life-changing story that you just told, right? That survivorship bias, where of course that's the story you're telling because it's the one that followed through. But the person you randomly meet in a coffee shop, the person you have a 10-second conversation with, a 5-minute conversation that you don't even get their name, you never end up talking to again, that can still have a ripple effect, and does in fact have ripple effects.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely. And if the physicists are right, there are an infinite number of universes out there where different choices were made. And
mm.
so there's one out there where I am a tax inspector beavering away at this very moment. So it's something to
So
reflect on,
interesting.
isn't it? There are many
Yeah.
of these in life, and the choices we make. And I think you're right about entrepreneurs. I mean, I guess I've been one since 1988 was when I started my first business. I don't think there's a huge difference, except that entrepreneurs kind of have a bit more faith, by which I mean
Mm.
a commitment to the idea that all will be well. I don't mean
Mm.
some sort of glowing evangelistic vision of the future, or some do, but I certainly didn't. I tend to take life one day at a time, and I go along, and I believe in, synchronicity and things happening for a reason. I tend to go with the flow a great deal, but going with it, that's where the faith is. Not dithering and not going, well, should I? No, it's just, it'll be okay. And things turn out the way they turn out. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, that's, you know, crossing the bridge without the fear to the other side is a big part of being an entrepreneur. And a lot of people will not do that. They'll go, looks ropey to me. I'm not going there. I'll stay here. It's safe here. Thank you very much.
Mm. I love that you use that word synchronicity. I've been on a kick over the last 6 or 8 months of I've just been obsessed with the idea of luck in success, and I don't think it's talked about enough. I get worried that young people right now are only getting the survivorship bias. They're only seeing on social media the big success stories, and you don't see, for every one person that took that big risk and quit their 9 to 5 and stormed out and launched their own business, and 2 years later they were a multimillionaire. For all
Mm,
of those, there's probably 1,000 people that quit, stormed out, the big idea didn't work, and then now what? And they had to go do something else, right? And I get really curious about that, the role of luck. As you
mm,
said, maybe if the physicists are right, maybe you just happen to be in the one universe where the luck was in the right place and led you to here, and you have no idea what might have happened somewhere else. My question here, to drill into that synchronicity, is, first, do you believe in luck? But if you do, and it sounds like you do because of the way you mentioned synchronicity, more to the point, do you believe it's possible to increase your odds of being lucky?
yeah, well, I go back to listening. I think listening has a huge part to play. And when I talk about listening in this context, I'm not simply talking about listening to sound.
Mm.
I'm talking about being attentive. And that is really important to me. There are, unfortunately, I think a lot of people who go around in the modern world very desensitized because there's so much intensity going on. There are so many channels. There's all this research about young people having a second screen or even a third screen while they're watching TV. There was a fascinating study I encountered last week which showed that people basically don't watch TV ads at all. They look away and they listen to TV ads. So if you're a brand advertising on TV and you don't mention your brand name, your ad is completely pointless. Well, it's an amazing revelation, because there's the arrogance of brands thinking people are there, watching the screen avidly. Well, they are not. They're making tea, or they're having a chat, or they're sending a text, or whatever it may be.
Mhm.
So, yes, I think attentiveness is really crucial. I'm not sure I believe in luck so
Okay.
much as taking chances. Yes, chance. I mean, things happen randomly, or maybe the universe conspires. I don't know. Maybe we'll know when we die. Maybe we won't.
Mm.
There's many unknowns about life. I do tend to think that having that feeling that all will be well is a more positive way to live, because when you live in faith like that, I don't mean a religious faith. I simply mean a faith that things will work out.
Sure.
Then you don't have so much anxiety and worry. And worry to me is one of the most redundant things. It gets in the way of a lot of communication. People listening from fear, what
Mm.
can go wrong here, and so forth. That's not a great listening position. A listening position of faith, all will be well. We cross one bridge at a time. Let's just do this thing. And then what will happen, and it'll be fine. That's a much more measured and relaxing and positive way to go through life than the fear based approach. So, attentiveness and faith, I think those are two big legs of being able to seize chances and take advantage of things that turn up.
That's
If you
great.
don't spot them, you'll miss them. And if you spot them and you're frightened of them, you'll miss them.
Mm. Oh, it's so powerful. Thank you for that really considered answer. I have a lot to think about there. Before we wrap up, before I ask you a final question, I want to give you a chance to chat about your new course, which you have an online course now, right?
Mm,
Your book is wonderful. We'll have that in the show notes. The book is How to Be Heard, right?
yes.
It's really excellent. It's and just for the listener, there's a lot of communication books that are very good in terms of their research, but they tend to be very dense and very difficult to read. If you're not already interested in the subject, like I am, if you're just looking to get some actual use out of it, your book has the research, but it's not dense. It's really easy to read, and I mean that in the best possible way. It's easy to read and then immediately implement into your personal and professional life. So definitely go to the show notes and check out How to Be Heard. But you have a new online course, which has probably, I would imagine, a lot even more to it than you would get from a book or certainly from a 10-minute TED Talk. So what's the course about? What do we get from it?
Yeah, well, it came out of the TED Talk on speaking, which is called How to Speak So That People Want to Listen. So I named the course the same thing. But the TED Talk was, I think, 14 minutes long. The course is 7.5 hours of material in 9 chapters. It covers listening, it covers speaking, it covers the reasons we don't do either of those two things very well. So lots of caveats and things to look out for and work on. It's full of exercises, and it's basically everything I've learned over the years about communication skills. There's a chapter in there from my fiance, the wonderful Jane Magendie, who's a 4-time world champion martial artist, yoga and
Wow.
well-being expert, and it's called Fit to Speak, which covers nutrition, hydration, relaxation,
Mm.
stretching, warm-up exercises, and so forth. Often something people don't think about when they're speaking, but you will know it's really important that you are fit to speak.
I know it's important, but I'm bad at it. So I could definitely use that chapter.
Well, then enjoy Jane's chapter, and then it kind of culminates in a masterclass from me on public speaking. So it's everything I've learned, everything that can go wrong, how to make sure it doesn't, how to deal with it if it does, and how to give of your best every single time that you walk onto the stage. So I'm really pleased with it, and I mean the genesis of this course really, apart from coming out of the book, writing the book was a wonderful experience, and recording it, incidentally, which we did in the little studio up here. I recorded the audiobook, which won the Audie and the SOVAS Awards for Best Business Audiobook of 2018-19,
It's amazing.
which was
Congratulations.
thrilling. Well, thank you. I mean, it's
Yeah.
absolutely amazing. Um, the book kind of laid the foundations for this course, but I had a pulmonary embolism in October 2018,
Mm.
which came about through a lot of flying. I'm sure you do a lot of flying.
Yeah.
Many people listening to this probably do as well. I would just say, please don't take it for granted. Exercise, stretch, drink lots of water, move your legs, get up, move around. Make sure that you're looking after yourself, because I took it for granted. The result was a DVT, and that went straight through to my lung. And in order to get to the lung, it goes through the heart, and that's where you can die. That's where a pulmonary
Mm.
embolism can actually kill you. So that was a showstopper, really. I had to reassess, do I want to go on traveling to this degree? I'm very passionate about getting communication skills out there. Listening, is, as I said, the key, but the speaking, all of the teaching about speaking is the spoonful of sugar. That's the thing that will make people want to take this course, I hope. Um, so I thought, okay, the way to do this, the way to get the knowledge out there to as many people as possible without stepping onto quite as many aeroplanes, is to put it online, to put it
Mm.
out there. So we've got it up on a website, speaklistenbe.com, and I hope many people check it out and enjoy it. The best access for it actually is probably to go to juliantreasure.com and then put your email address in, and you'll get 5 free listening exercises, little videos from me. And then you'll get the opportunity to download the first chapter of the course and see if you like it. So
Terrific.
that's probably the easiest way to do it. But I'm very
Great.
proud of it, and I'm excited to have it out there, um, and hopefully spreading lots of ripples of
Hmm.
listening in a world that sorely needs listening and good speaking too.
Fantastic. Well, we will definitely make sure that that's in the show notes, and I think this sounds like something, obviously professionals, but I think especially if you're just getting out of college or doing grad school, just at the beginning of your career, that sounds like exactly the kind of thing that is desperately needed right now, especially as young people are looking into, as I mentioned, an increasingly unpredictable world and economy and workforce, and automation is taking over and all these sorts of things. So to kind of ping off that point into the final question, for those people the young professionals, the young adults looking to build that sustainable career. You've given so much advice here, so this may be something of a redundant question, but if you had, 30 seconds to speak to someone like that and give them a piece of advice, or a minute, whatever, to speak to them and give them one piece of advice on how to build a meaningful career, a sustainable career in the world that we're heading into right now, what would you tell them?
Well, definitely listening would be at the top of the list, and I think a quality of attention which is invaluable now is curiosity. Curiosity with compassion, really. I mean, the combination of arrogance and a kind of numbness or distraction. Arrogance and distraction is a terrible combination, and it's unfortunately a very common one now. Whereas I think if you can be fully present and listening and curious, which is it's a humble way to be. I want to learn. I'm not perfect. I have a lot to learn. What could I learn in this conversation, in this book, in this exercise, in this environment, in this company, so forth? If you're soaking it up and curious in that way, I think you've got a great chance of being on a fast track. Whereas a lot of people who are sitting there thinking they know it all, and sending in texts and so forth and broadcasting their genius to the world. That's not really going to be a long-term strategy for success.
What a great way to end. Julian, I can't thank you enough for your time, and just on a personal note, this has been an especially thrilling hour for me. I've been such a fan for
Oh,
so
thank you, Graham.
long. I've just
Thank you.
watched your talks and enjoyed your work over and over and over again. So thank you for this. I really appreciate it.
Well, it's been a huge pleasure for me. I've really enjoyed the conversation, and maybe we'll meet on a stage somewhere, somehow.
I hope so.